Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is Kathy Mason, and I am so excited to be part of Co-Creators Convergence Gift of the Magi with these amazing beings of light that have stories to tell you about their near-death experience that will hopefully ignite your spiritual knowing as well and help you not be afraid of death and connect to who you really are. Today, what I wanted to do to start, and our theme is NDEs and oneness. And our panel today has Rob Gentile and Brooke Grove. And if Kimberly shows up, Kimberly Clark Sharp. We may hopefully, maybe Jackie wants to be her substitute, if not. Anyway, but I am so excited to have this conversation. I am a volunteer for INDS, which is INDS, which is International Association for Near-Death Studies. And I am so excited every time I'm around near-death experiencers because it feels like home. I've had a spiritually transformative experience. I haven't had a near-death experience that I know of, but the open-heartedness of these beings, they really have superpowers almost after they've had these experiences. So what I wanted to start with was just explaining a little bit. And NDE equals a near-death experience. This event is so profound that it often alters the experiencer's life completely. Perhaps the most common after effect of an NDE is the loss of the fear of death and a strengthened belief in the afterlife. There is typically a new awareness of meaning and purpose in experiencers' lives, a new sense of self with increased self-esteem and possibly new healing skills is reported by many, which Brooke will be able to talk about. If you are new to this subject, I think you'll find our panel's generous sharing today quite fascinating. So today we're honored to have these near-death experiencers here. And Rob, I want to explain, Rob was introduced to me by Jacqueline Arnold, who's in the audience today. And he is a North Carolina author and father of a special needs daughter. And he made medical history with his new Pulse CV IVAS heart pump, which kept him alive while he received a donor heart given by a girl who died from suicide. He wrote a book about it and his journey and what it's like to die twice and come back to life. And you guys, the book is amazing. Rob, will you wave to us? So, okay, thank you so much. And then Brooke, again, these people are so luminary. This is so cool. Brooke was a psychotherapist and an academic, but now she's, after her near-death experience, she's really turned into a person that helps people heal in a organic multidisciplinary healing method that's much more filled with consciousness and light. It is not the traditional method, and she'll tell you all about it. But after working with IONS as a volunteer for years now, I can tell you a lot of these people, their superpowers get ignited from their experience. And Rob will be able to tell you about his too, because these people, their hearts are wide open. So with that, I'd love if you could, I'm going to ask you a question, and then Brooke will start with you, and then Rob, okay? So Brooke, please share your near-death experience and the after effects of your experience. And what guidance can you share for us about your heart opening transformation? Thank you, Brooke.
You're welcome. Well, those are some big questions. Wow, let's see. How do we give words to the ineffable? I always find that's the hardest part about describing the NDE, what came before and what came after. We have language for that. But language is a construct, a very human construct. And in my experience of the cosmic, there were no words. It was all communicated in light. And my after effects continue to be communicated in light. So I'll start with a little bit of the human facts, which led to the NDE, and then give you a synopsis and focus on your after effects and how they transitioned into my current practice. So in 2010, on December 6th, I slipped into a coma caused by systemic organ failure of the liver, lungs, and kidneys. It happened so rapidly, I had been misdiagnosed, and we didn't know the liver had been severely compromised. So when I was taking the medication for the pain and some of the other organs, the liver actually shut down. And as it shut down, I swelled up about 20 or 30 pounds almost instantaneously. The bile from the liver is released. My liver count on the helicopter ride was over 250,000. According to medical odds, you should be dead somewhere around 100,000. A normal range is 21 to 45, I believe, is optimal. So I rapidly went into liver failure. I was helicoptered from the local hospital to Johns Hopkins, where ironically, I was going to do autoimmune research right before this occurred. And so my NDE begins when I am in ICU and they are doing everything they can to save me. And the best description I can give in human constructs is that my consciousness was lifted through a light body out of the physical, and I was able to observe myself from above. And yet, curiously, I was still very much myself. I was looking down at that body on the table and I didn't recognize it, but I did recognize the amount of protective gear that the attendees were wearing and that it was ICU. I also noticed that it looked very scientific. So for a while, as a lifelong lucid dreamer, I thought I was lucid dreaming. And I made every attempt to reconnect with the body. And then suddenly, there was like this magnetizing force that pulled my consciousness in this orb that it was into a space that I can only describe as like the cosmos, or the cosmos in Technicolor. Now, when I arrived in this space, I felt something I've never, and to this date, that's never hit the volume of this feeling in this incarnation. I felt held. And my history as a human is as a polytrauma survivor. So to go into this space where light, all different types of light, moving faster than I could possibly describe, and yet there was darkness too, much like space. There was blackness, there were black holes, but it was filled with light and everything was communicating, and all of this information was being received through inner knowing. There were no words. It's so difficult to give words to something wherein there were no words. But I was held, and it was as if all the ascended masters, whatever your tradition, whatever your belief, whatever your religion, whatever your spiritual path, if you don't have a spiritual path, none of that matters. I was just held by this divine love. It cradled me. It let me know that everything I had been through, everything I thought I was, those were just, again, human constructs. I was this light. In fact, the light that was holding me, I was part of it. And I understood that without them speaking to me. Now, what I was most surprised about instantly arriving in this space was that I was greeted by a team, and I do prefer to call them team, but of very high vibrational beings. Most people would probably refer to them as angels. That them again, they were light. But what was magnificent was that they were recognized to me. I knew them from my childhood. They had been with me through so many different adventures, so many close calls, and I felt so comforted by their presence. And so I was comatose for 3 days in the human world. However, over there is no time and things move much, much faster. So as I spent time with these beings in human time, 3 days, it felt like years. They gave me so much information that was beyond my grasp of understanding at the time, but they held it all with reverence. The information that was given to me through inner knowing and telepathy is only becoming clear 10 years later. I was very attracted to the source light, the largest light, the one from which we all come from. And they let me know that it was okay to go back there and that I was welcome there. I was always welcome there, that we were all fractals of it and we would return there. Yet I had a choice. I could come back to this incarnation and I could continue the mission that I had chosen and signed up for, or I could go back to that light and come back and re-experience some things. Now imagine you're a polytrauma survivor in 3 decades of your, or I was 29. So the majority of your life has been trauma. Do you think you want to rush right back to that body? No, I can laugh about it now, but they're holding me in that love. And I know it's okay. There's no judgment for how I responded to said trauma. And I did respond in survival mode for a very long time. So if there was judgment on the other side, I would imagine I would have been judged for said behaviors. Yet that was not the case. I was held in the most profound love. Love is an understatement. I don't think we have a word for what exists on the other side. And so I spent lots of time with them, received much information. They were generous enough to introduce me to the auras, which were really percolating a very different vibration, energetic signature than the light beings, the angelics, and of course the source light. And these lights themselves, they had this specific curiosity to me, and I couldn't understand why at the time. Now I'm just going back a little bit. They have told me it's going to be difficult to come back, and now they're showing me these lights. Suddenly, my consciousness is torn between, do I reunify with the one, which is where I really want to go, or do I return to this body, which seems to be connected somehow to these other forms of light? And then there was as if my soul in that moment remembered exactly what it had signed up for and what it was here to do. And all of that information, although it wasn't in a linear sense of understanding, resonated. It made sense. And I knew I needed to return to the human. And I wanted to return to the human. That's not saying there wasn't trepidation. It wasn't like I was like, yay, all aboard. But I knew that there was something to happen. Spirit was communicating in light, but the information they were giving me was about an awakening that was coming, and that this awakening would begin to dawn and really come into the collective 10 years after my return. And 10 years seemed like a long time to a 29-year-old. Because again, the human consciousness is part still of this orb of light. It's playful, it's lighter, it's without all the shadow, but it's there. And so I decide that I will return, and I ask Spirit and the angelics, how do I get back? Because I'm so held and I don't want to let go. That was the biggest, just being held like that was so phenomenal, and something that I hope we're all able to do for each other with time as we continue in our ascension process. That said, they told me to look for the light like unlike any others. Again, this is in telepathy. It's said much more eloquently. That said, I decide to look for that light. My orb is shifted. I immediately find this pulsating artificial light, which I anchor in on, and I'm immediately back in the body. Now, talk about duality. I've just come from the most ineffable, peaceful, infinite, cosmic space. And suddenly I'm catapulted into a body wherein I'm intubated. I can't speak. I'm strapped down to a bed because I have a PICC line going into my brain. I've been declared brain dead, so no one's expecting me to respond. I've been read my last rites. And so for 3 more days, I sat in that body, unable to communicate, attempting to get the attention of the nursing staff. And it was during that time I discovered that I had become a whole new person since I opened my eyes. Because the moment I opened my eyes, despite the fact they had taken my contacts and I'm nearly legally blind, I could see auras. I could see the energy field of absolutely everything, whether it was living, whether it was non-living, whether it was electronical. Everything had an aura. And the way I'd always been taught auras or thought of auras is, what's your aura color? As if there was some base color and that's how it stayed. No, this was energy in motion. Everything was constantly ebbing and flow. The best comparison I can give you is like an Alex Gray painting moving. That's really what it looked like. Additionally, I had medical intuition come on full blast. No one was communicating to me what happened, but I intuitively knew my liver had failed. I could feel that. I could see light pouring from my hands whenever I would touch certain places. The angelics who had been with me were present in the room. I'm in ICU. There are glass walls everywhere. Suddenly, when they call code red or code blue, I can see the soul body or the ghost body ascend in transition through the pillar of light. Now, mind you, I was in my candidacy as a clinical psychologist when this occurred. So to wake up and suddenly have the sixth sense and beyond and all of the etheric chakras wide open was very discombobulating for me. And that was the beginning of when I decided, I am not who I was, but I don't know if I can be this person. And therein became a 7-year struggle, which looking at the NDE literature is quite common. I was pretty standard there, except I went through many dark nights of the soul because I really my human and my spirit were at odds. The human returned and wanted to be what it had worked to be. The spirit was like, oh no, we know we're someone else and we're here to do all of that. But management of these after effects was very daunting. So I went through periods where I tried to really shut them off. I tried not to embrace them. I tried to go back to clinical psychology. And yet spirit communicated through me, just as it did with others, through the body. And each time, although I had achieved spontaneous remission from organ failure, I had no brain damage. I was called a miracle by all of my doctors. And I walked out 21 days after my NDE when they said it would take 6 months to a year of rehabilitation and a liver transplant. By the way, they just found me a liver on my 10-year anniversary, except I do not need it because I remain in spontaneous remission. The odds on that were less than 1%, by the way, which is why they kept me on the list. So that said, I went through these dark periods, and it was through that I realized there's such a gap in care. As much as we have such wonderful NDE research, there's such often an emphasis on the ND and the ineffable itself. However, the return, coming back to the human, it is essential to delivering the message, to being light consciousness embodied, and to really reach the masses. So for me, there was a lot of shadow work that occurred afterwards, and my training as a psychotherapist was of great assistance. But ultimately, I realized I wanted to reach the persons who didn't identify with the rapid self-healing, who had trauma histories, who already dissociated and had out-of-body experiences prior to their NDEs. That was who I was, and I knew that was unique amongst the spectrum of NDEers, and that it wasn't being addressed, at least in the populace. And so over the past few years, I started speaking my truth, which was very difficult for me. I don't enjoy public speaking, to be honest. I love that I'm able to push through with the aid of spirit now and the healing aid of water. But that said, once I began speaking, doors just started opening. And I shifted my practice, and I went and trained with shamans to learn how to be in the body, because I was constantly floating back out to the cosmos. Again, my etheric chakras are wide open, as are my uppers. So it's really important as an experiencer that I'm constantly grounding to stay in the body, especially as a trauma survivor. And so I went and I studied with shamans of all different paths, and something therein clicked, that I had this ability to use light, to work with the quantum field, to see the quantum field. And so I became really interested in vibrational medicine, transpersonal psychology, studying peak experiences, working with persons who had, really been on the other side of the bell curve. In clinical psychology, we study pathology, psychopathology. In transpersonal, we're looking more at peak experiences. And so my NDE was obviously one of those, as are all mystical or spiritually transformative experiences. So I began to really create a medicine bag using the shamanic skill sets I picked up, the gifts that spirit had given me. I created boundaries with spirit. I learned that I had a say in this. I used to think I had to walk down the street and see everybody's stuff, and it was overwhelming and taxing, and hence why I wanted to run. But then they lovingly taught me that just like with everything else, you ask, you set boundaries, and you create ritual and ceremony. And through that, this becomes the superpower that you alluded to, Kathy. We're able to embody it and use it as an act of service and not be overwhelmed by it. It taught me so much about being a born empath and highly sensitive person, how to work with that population. It taught me a lot about the intuitive children that are coming in already activated. They do not need a mystical experience or NDE. It taught me how to work with their sensitivities in a way wherein my clinical understanding would let me know this isn't genuine pathology. This is sensitivity. It's a psychic gift, but it needs to be taught discernment. It needs to be given the language to express itself, and it needs the existence of its teams. And so the beautiful gift of this is that the more I speak out, the more light-filled souls find me. And there's so many children whose parents are not exactly spiritually open themselves, yet their heart open. And they're running from this heart-centered place where they see their children having spiritual emergencies or spiritual gifts. And they hear these talks and these YouTube videos and they reach out. And so I've had the most extraordinary just 3 years. But in the past year alone, since I've really just pushed through my own fear to share this, I've worked with people in 32 countries, all using this modality that really was born from spirit and is highly integrative. So it fuses the multidisciplinary psychology, shamanic energy medicine, quantum field work, vibrational medicine, and then as well neuroscience, my meditation teacher training, and some other skill sets I've picked up along the way. And of course, it's trauma sensitively oriented. So that's just a bit about my NDE, because I know we're time sensitive, but I'm happy to go into more depth about any of that when we get to Q&As. I just want to make sure Rob has ample time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We actually have more time now, but we'll still keep the format, and then I think we'll enjoy the comparison, and even you guys could ask each other questions, I think. So thank you so much, Brooke. And I have to say, when I went to your website, I had a spiritually transformative experience, not an NDE, but I related totally to your journey and related and saw you as a resource or a ally in the change, because what you're doing is really going to help more people understand this journey and make it better. And that's what Rob will talk about too. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So now, Rob, do you want to unmute yourself? I think you need to. Great. Okay.
Yep, I
Thanks,
did. Can
Rob.
you hear me okay?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for doing this. This is going to be wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you for having me, Kathy. I'm delighted to be here. Let me start out by saying, Brooke, we need to talk. Because there is so much about your experience that parallels mine in so many ways, which we'll get into in this discussion, but incredible. So to talk a little bit about my NDE and how it all happened for me, mine was also a medical emergency, very much like yours. And it was almost 5 years ago. Well, actually 5 years ago now. It was on January 26, 2016. a couple of days prior, I had some minor surgery where I had some bone spurs removed from my neck that from old sports injuries. And 4 days later, because I've always taken care of myself, been a healthy guy, but 4 days later at 11 p.m. in my bed, evidently the theory is I threw a blood clot, had a massive heart attack, and I just started screaming and thrashing in my bed. My wife didn't know what was going on, called 911. I was unconscious from the pain. Don't remember anything about the ambulance ride, none of it. Thank goodness the hospital is 3 miles from my house. So I get into the emergency room, and immediately they knew I was having a massive heart attack. They gave me some blood thinners. They gave me some things to stabilize me. And I was laying on the gurney, and right before I flatlined, something incredible happened. I sprang forward on the gurney in what I describe in my book as a moment from the movie The Exorcist. It was like somebody had grabbed me by my shirt and pulled me forward with great force, and my eyes sprung wide open, and I screamed out the name Frosty. And when I screamed that name out, I had collapsed backwards on the gurney. Code blue rang out. In rushed a team of doctors and began to work on me. Now, what happened is that, interestingly, 7 weeks prior to me having my massive heart attack, Frosty is my brother-in-law's nickname. And Frosty was going through a bad divorce at the time. He lives about 20 miles from me. And that night that he took his own life, he was living with his parents in the upstairs bedroom. And his mother called me and said, "Can you please come down, go up into his room and see if you can find a journal or a note as to why he would have done something like this," because he left his daughter behind. And so 7 times I went up into that room and picked through a rather gruesome scene until I finally found a journal, which I had given to the family. So there's the backstory. But when code blue rang out, my wife was ushered out of the room. In the hallway, she had dropped to her knees and began praying to God to save my life. And interestingly, there was a young Indian woman by the name of Dr. Patel, who's one of my very good friends now. Because like you, my whole medical history, my journey to heart transplant is very well documented. I went back and I interviewed all of the doctors along my journey to make sure that I had everything right. And I'm a journaler. But for 20 minutes, Dr. Patel worked on me. She could not resuscitate me. She did IV epinephrine, stuck the needle in my heart several times, paddle shocks, sternal rubs. They could not get a pulse. So finally, after 20 minutes, the cardiologist was not in the hospital. He was en route. She was able to obtain a slight pulse through everything that she was doing until the cardiologist arrived. He got there, he found the blockage, put 2 stents in my heart, but it was too late. Deep damage had already been done to my heart. I went into cardiogenic shock. I was intubated, and I slipped into a 4-day coma. So much like Brooke, while I was in that 4-day coma, I was raised Catholic. My brother called the local parish priest. He came, anointed me with oil, gave me my last rites. Several neurologists during that 4-day period came in to see if I were brain dead. They couldn't figure out if I was brain dead or not. And on the 4th day, my doctor decided, he said, "Look, we told my wife, we have to take the tubes out. If he starts to breathe on his own, we'll see what we have, but he's probably going to be a vegetable." But of course, I started choking. Here I am. But what happened is that when I came out of coma the first day, my wife approached my bed, and I said to her, "You have to believe me, Melanie. You have to believe me. Your brother came to me and he spoke to me." And she said to me, "No, it makes total sense now." I said, "Why do you say that?" She said, "Well, right before you flatlined, you sprung forward on the gurney, screamed out his name, and then collapsed backwards." And she said, "Tell me exactly what he said to you." And Frosty said to me, I've made a big mess out of things. I need you to go back, help clean things up, but tell my parents I'm in a good place. Which was very curious to me because I was, having been raised Catholic, I was told that suicide was the ultimate mortal sin. It was straight to hell, no pass go. So this was really my first moment of spiritual awakening, that Frosty coming to me really changed that whole paradigm and shifted me into opening my mind and spirit to say, hey, there's something else out there that I don't understand yet. And I didn't realize at the time too, that Frosty was going to prepare me for my most profound near-death experience while waiting for a donor heart in Chicago. But what was curious, there was something else about that experience that had been bothering me, and I couldn't figure it out because it was locked deep inside my subconscious, because something else happened when Dr. Patel was working on me and I couldn't figure it out. So the second day out of coma, Dr. Patel comes into my room, who I'd obviously never seen before. And she pulls up a chair and she sits down beside me and she begins to cry and tell me how many times she almost lost me and how happy she was to see me alive. And then all of a sudden the conversation got very, very personal. She started to tell me about her father and things started to click. And as she told the story, I realized something, because she said, I was pregnant with my first son, and my father, that's all he lived for. He wanted to see that child's face. We were so close that we can read each other's minds. And she said, 6 months before my child was born, he had a massive aneurysm and died. And she said, I've lost hope. I've been bitter about this. And she said, but seeing you, maybe, just maybe, there's some hope out there for me. And curiously, my subconscious unlocked, and there it was. While she was working on me that whole time, a male spirit had entered the room and kept on repeating the same thing. Keep working on him. Don't give up. You can save him, over and over and over again. And I told Dr. Patel that story, and she started to bawl, and then she realized that her father had never left her. So it was just an incredible beginning to my near-death experience. So what happened is that when I was released from the hospital, of course, I couldn't be released without a defibrillator vest, because I was constantly going into cardiac arrest. So this defibrillator vest I had to wear day and night. It would shock me back to life every time my heart failed. Talk about anxiety. And then they also put a port in my chest to drip this medicine on my heart called milrinone, which the doctor said it kind of works like STP. It makes the heart pump faster and harder to keep you alive, but it also starts the clock ticking because it makes the heart wear out really fast. So I tried to get a heart here in North Carolina, all the transplant centers around here. I couldn't get a heart. Long story short, it was the owner of my company, actually, that's headquartered in Chicago, that I didn't know was on the board and is a philanthropist and has donated an awful lot of money to the University of Chicago Medicine. So it was my owner that got me to Chicago, where I would become a kind of like a guinea pig, a clinical trial for a brand new heart pump that Kathy had mentioned that had never been on the market before, because they had to find something to keep me alive until my donor heart arrived. So a doctor approached me, a very tall Indian man approached me, and he said, hey, look, I've been working on this new heart pump for many, many years. And he said, I'm gonna just fish a little balloon down through your aorta, and out your left side will come these wires, and it's gonna attach to this little pump about the size of a lunchbox, and it'll keep you alive. You'll be able to walk around and not atrophy. And he said, this is going to change the history of cardiac care. I said, wow, that's fantastic, doc. I said, how many people have you had this thing in? And he said, well, that's just it. He said, we've used it on cows and a few pigs, but he said, it's up to you, but if you don't do it, you're probably going to die. So I asked him in that moment, I said, how many people do you think this would help? And he said, I could tell you that if this thing works, we're going to be able to send patients home while they wait for a heart instead of living in the hospital like you. And he said the chances were really great that this thing's going to work. So I prayed about it, and as it turns out, the new pulse has become a bridge to transplant for so many people. It's all across the country now. I can't tell you how many people have been transplanted with the new pulse. So it was just an incredible gift that I was really delighted to help pay forward. So here's what happened. Even with the new pulse, the milrinone dripping on my heart, all this equipment to try to keep me alive, my heart gave out a second time. And it was there in that place in the hospital in Chicago when I just released my spirit. My heart again had failed. And much like you, Brooke, but it was a different sensation, a different feeling. I didn't feel myself ascend. I didn't feel my spirit ascend. All of a sudden, I just found myself standing in the middle of nowhere in this infinite, vast space. And the way I describe it in the book, and it took me 3 years to write the book, mainly because, as you mentioned, there's no language for this. And it really stubbed me the whole time. It's the shortest chapter in the book and the most difficult chapter that I had written because I couldn't find the language. But I describe it as kind of like staring out an airplane window on a clear day where you can see everything but nothing at all. That's the conundrum. It's very difficult because you're in the middle of nowhere. You're in this vastness, and you could see everything, but there's really nothing. And I can see myself standing in the middle of nowhere in my green hospital gown, and I looked whole and I looked well. And at the same time, I saw myself in my broken, atrophied green body dying there with the pump hooked up to me and all of my IVs and everything trying to sustain me. So that was incredible. But then something happened while I was in this place of just peace and trying to figure out where I was. I saw and simultaneously became part of this incredibly large interactive web of twinkling lights. And the best way for me to describe it is how I describe it in the book. It was like, we all know what a neuron looks like from science class. It has a nucleus, and then it has these dendrites and tentacles woven together. And it looked like each dendrite and tentacle was woven to the next, and it created this beautiful tapestry of twinkling lights that seem to just extend into infinity and hang on the ceiling of the universe. And I realized in that place that inside each nucleus was this spark of light or a cork of light. And I somehow knew when I was in that place that each light represented a life. And much like your experience is that some parts of the web were not twinkling and they were not bright, they were darker than others. And I came to understand later, after research, that that was where human beings weren't emanating light. That's where they weren't being as spiritual and connected and loving as they could be here in the temporal world. And when I was in that place, understanding that I was connected to everything, I didn't have a sense of smell or taste or sound, but my ability to see light it became expanded, is probably the best way to see it. And this light, I had realized, was the light of God. And in that place, even though I didn't see any divine beings like you, it was placed on my spirit when I saw this one light that connects and binds us all, that I heard, I am the foundation for everything. This is divine source. This is your real identity. And when that came upon my spirit, I realized that I was in the presence of divine love and light. I realized that God, love, and light were one. And any question that I had, much like you, there was no language to explain it. It was like telepathy and synchronicity at the same time. All I had to do was think about any question, and it was already answered. And in that place, I knew that I was not my body, my race, my religion. I had just become part of everything. It was a message of unity and oneness. And when I was in that place, I thought to myself, if I hurt myself, I hurt everything connected to me, but if I love, the light will spread. And when I came to that realization, I knew that my real identity was God. It came from God. And I think that when we realize that our real identity comes from God, we can accomplish anything because we're part of that. We're a fleck, a speck, a flicker of that light, of that divine light. We're all divine. We all have a piece of this divine. And as Kathy had mentioned, I have a special needs child. She's nonverbal. She's severely handicapped. She has a very rare neurological disease, and she has a seizure disorder. And the most profound part of my experience in what I call the ethereal, I was in that ethereal place. I saw my daughter, Maria. And when I saw her, she was standing there and she was perfect and whole. And I began to speak to her in that unspoken language of the ethereal. And I cried out to her and I said, Maria, I said, please speak to me. I want to hear your voice. I want to know your personality. I want to hear you say just one time, I love you, Daddy. And she looked at me and her eyes were filled with this spiritual light, this beautiful light that I knew in that place was the light of the divine that shines through all of us. And she looked at me, and in that unspoken language, she spoke 3 magic words that have changed my life forever. And she said to me, just love me. And when she said, just love me, I remember crying out to the ethereal. I said, I never want to leave this place. And when I heard my own voice echo back to me in that place, I found myself back in my bed. And I was very upset about it. So that was the end of my near-death experience. But the after effects of that were, I realized in that moment that even though I wanted to come back and be with Maria and help her get through this temporal world and help my wife, that if I died in that moment and I didn't get a heart, it was okay. It was freedom. I knew where I was going. And that was an incredible experience for me to be in that place of freedom and love and light. And like you, after I got released from the hospital, I had to live in Chicago by myself. My wife would come and visit when she could. And I went through a really difficult period then, even though it was a great period because it was the foundation of, I was able to pull out my journals. I was able to pray and meditate and begin to put the pieces together, research as to what happened to me. And that was the genesis of the book. But I also found myself in this state of depression for the first 4 to 5 months because I was grappling with this unity and oneness and connectedness and peace that I experienced in the spiritual realm, but I couldn't find it here. I was grappling with the incongruence of trying to be back in this body and experience that peace. So I would go into this meditation routine every day, and I would try and failed every day to get back into that place, back into that space. And I realized I couldn't get there. And then one day I had a pastor come and visit me, actually a Chinese man. And he came to visit me, and I felt like I could kind of unload on him because I didn't know him and he wouldn't think I was crazy. So I was telling him a little bit about my experience, and he said something to me that really was a watershed moment for me. He said, you know what your problem is, Rob? He said, you have grown too fat in the spirit from your journey. So he said, to get thin again, living in the temporal world, he said, give back to God through all of your works by serving others, by being kind, by sharing your story, by helping people understand the spiritual realm and that we're actually spiritual beings having a human experience. And he said, you have to learn how to see the divine in everyone and everything again. And when you learn that, you don't have to spend all this time meditating, trying to go back up into the ethereal, because the divine is right here. It's in the tree, it's in the plant, it's in the inanimate, it's in the animate, it's in everything. And that was the shift for me. And since then, you know, sometimes I see my daughter and she's still struggling, but I remember that moment. And I remember now that she's perfect in spirit. I'm here to help her get through these difficult periods, but I know in spirit that she's not in pain and that she's not suffering. And I think that once we realize as a people that we're all connected, that we're all one, that we all share this divinity, it's the only way that we're ever going to find peace within ourselves and peace within our world.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rob. Would you be so kind as to pull your book off the shelf right behind you and
sure.
show it so people, this book is remarkable, remarkable. So, oh my goodness. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. So this is, there's more to Rob's story. You got to stay tuned for the next part. So it looks like I found I found Kimberly and I got a substitute at the same time. So let's see how this all works. Okay, guys, I hope you'll be flexible and understanding. This is interesting. Okay, so Noelle, if you would be so kind to help me, I'm going to actually put, do you have Kimberly up? And I want to honor
Kimberly needs to start her video.
Kimberly, can you start your video? Or why don't we start with Dawn for at least a little bit and then we'll go to Kimberly, okay? Because he was so kind to drop everything. Yeah, now we've got a party going.
Okay, all right. All right.
Okay, so Don,
Yes.
you probably have about 10 minutes or 15 minutes at the most to talk, but I'd love to have you answer the same question. Don is in Puerto Vallarta, and like you, Brooke, his superpowers ignited after 3 near-death experiences. So Don, the question is, please share your NDE experience and the after effects of your experience. What guidance can you share for us about your heart opening transformation?
Well, I can't, you know, Kathy got a hold of me just minutes ago and said, you know, do you want to get on here? I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And then she said, yeah, I have to talk about my NDE. And I'm like, and I honest to God, I mean, you guys, you guys forced me to actually go back and relive a lot of that stuff. And I realized, like, in this moment when Kathy asked me to start talking about that NDE again, like my body just went, ugh. I'm like, I'm still, you know, I guess I haven't really totally recovered from it, but so it's basically, you know, I'm a slow learner. It took me 3 near deaths in the water in less than a year. And then without going into gory details or anything, but I used to do free diving at night and had experiences in the water that nearly took my life. You know, I can go into details if you want me to, but in only 10 minutes it'd take up too much time. But what I'd like to do is talk about like some of the things that happened to me afterwards. And it all started it wasn't too long after my 3rd time nearly dying in the water here that I was sitting on the rooftop, actually in the same building I'm in right now. And I just started, my body just started taking deep breaths and blowing it out. and was uncontrollable for minutes. And just like, my wife is, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then shortly after that, it was like in the coffee shop, and I suddenly I could feel other people's pains, and discovered that I could actually take them out of their bodies. And that was the beginning of this stage of my life. And so I've talked, Kathy knows me on a deep level, and so does Kim. And I have blasts with both of them, but I recently worked with Kim and had a really fun time with her. But so what I can do is, like, I can help people, like myself, that still have stuff latent from even consciously or unconsciously, from near-death experiences and stress and anxiety and all that stuff. What I can do now is actually show people how to take care of the stuff instantly and release the effects that it has on our physical bodies. And so, like, if you guys all want to try this, we can do a group one right here. Just kind of take your right hand, put it on your hearts. It'll go to your physical heart. And I'm going to pick on Rob just because he was just before me, and he's like right here in front of me. So Rob, move your hand like towards your left shoulder about 2 inches, and go up there and just kind of feel your body gradually change as you move it. And right there, you can feel it kind of tightening up. And right there, just stop right there, Rob, and feel that energy around your heart right there, kind of like a little tightness going on there, maybe resistance. Okay. And then put a number on it, if you will, like 1 to 10. Now everybody can do this at their own free will, and put a number on it. Okay. And now just with your other hand, just tap on your leg like 4 or 5 times firmly, and then just take a deep breath and blow it all the way out. And Kathy, for future reference, most people's hearts are actually located on the other side of their chest. On your left side, Kathy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm like watching you, trying to figure out how I'm going to get Kimberly on too.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So as you may have noticed, if you go back and go to that same exact point and see if it changed in any way, it could be moved off to the side a little bit, or might have went up or went down in number. Okay. I see Rob's moving his hand around there. So right there's another one. Rob's got one right there. And so just put your brain right there, Rob, and feel that point of electro resistance around your physical heart right there. Quantify it 1 to 10. Focus on a pinpoint of energy right there. And now with your other hand, just tap on your leg firmly, like 3 or 4 times. Take a deep breath and blow it all the way out. And now Kimberly shows up. I expected her to save me when she came into this. All right. So, one of the things that I came back with when it came out of this whole experience was an understanding that the humans are just bags of water, and we have electricity bouncing around in us, and we have an animal brain actually running the whole show up there in our brains. And this has allowed me to treat some things that some people call mysterious or undiagnosable or untreatable. And that's because what I'm doing is actually treating electro resistance in the bag of water. I don't have to put names on it. Those points that you felt around your heart. Now, some people might say, oh, that was your grandma Ellie that told you when you were 7 years old that you were a bad girl and you weren't supposed to do that. And now you've carried that around in that heart for so long. But in reality, what it comes down to is it's just a point of electro resistance in the bag of water that we are. That's all it is. And the brain, the animal brain, has the ability to actually heal the body. But we have to get our egos out of the way. We have to be able to feel on a profound level. And that's one of the things I can do with people. And that's what I do. And there's another one that I know a lot of the audience that you're going to be addressing, you guys address, is that everybody knows Bruce Lipton, and he takes like a piece of paper and he puts steel filings on it, okay? And if he shakes it, the filings don't take any form, but if he puts a magnet underneath it, it takes the shape of the field, and it proves that the field actually exists. And he says, okay, now doctors, when they're treating cancer, they go to this one little steel filing that's on this piece of paper. They go to that one little piece and they treat that piece, okay? They're not treating the fields that it exists in. And that's part of my higher level, higher functioning stuff is about treating fields. And when you treat the field, a lot of these symptoms that pop up that some people call diseases and chronic illnesses and things like that, those things are actually existing in a field. And sometimes you can actually change the field internally in the physical body as well as outside of the body. And those symptoms all disappear.
Right.
That's a fact. That is a fact. And so instead of playing whack-a-mole with all these little symptoms that pop up in our lives, you go and you treat the field, okay?
Okay.
And only treat the symptoms if you absolutely positively need to. And you treat the field and take care of the root causes of stuff. Okay.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for being such a good friend and jumping in for me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Kimberly, thank you. And
Oh, hey,
yes,
hey, Kathy, can I say one more thing?
no, but yeah.
All right, come on, please. Pretty please. Hey, Kimberly, Kimberly and I had a grand time. And when I did the
Seattle.
interview thing,
With
I had,
Seattle.
yeah, in Seattle. I
Yeah.
mean, the people that signed up after that with me to do one-on-one sessions, I mean, they were so high functioning people. I'm like, God, these guys are these people that went through this stuff. These are really special people. And I had a blast working with them. And I want to thank Kathy and Kimberly for getting me into this, because I'm finding this is really exciting for me. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming to my rescue, because I couldn't find you, Kimberly. Hi.
I have been hi. My apologizing is worthless at this
It's
point.
okay. It's okay. Well, let everyone know who you are.
Okay,
And
my name is, as Marilyn Monroe once said before singing happy birthday to John F. Kennedy, presenting now the late Kimberly Clark Sharp. And given that, I've had a near-death experience, that's pretty much true. I've been speaking on the subject of near-death experiences since 1977. I have never messed up this bad in my life. On my calendar, in my brain, I had it at not East Coast time, but Seattle time. So I had another 2 hours to put on makeup. I'm still wearing my nightie. This is how real I am at this point. This is the natural Kim. I ran a brush through my hair, no makeup, no clothes on, and yet I am here most sincerely to be of service in the time we have left.
thank you.
And that amount of time, I want to talk about unity, because I have proof of unity, since that's the theme of this whole wonderful conference, by the way, wonderful conference, is world unity. And I have the absolute be all and end all evidence of that. And that has to do with our belly buttons. We all have belly buttons. And we could start there. That's like ground zero. What do we have in common with each other? No matter our skin color, our religious beliefs, our socioeconomic standing, our geographical residences, our limits or unlimited availabilities to use it, no matter what, we have our belly buttons in common. And so that is where I like to start. So I wanted to get that in. So if you have a belly button, I love you, and we are all one. The other thing, since time is short, is that I want to talk about another bit of evidence, but within my near-death experience, which is just too long now for me to, write to me. You can find me, Kimberly Clark Sharp. I'm here. Is that part of my near-death experience involved being with a great light that I called Homie Home, but it was all love, and it was love for everybody, everybody. And that's hard to, I was sent back to serve, and that's not easy, because there's some jerkoids out there. There's some people like, thank you, I don't really want to love you. And then I get whacked upside of the head, love them. All right. So that's our human assignment, is really to love everybody. That doesn't mean you don't set boundaries, you know. You don't like step across the street if somebody threatening is coming towards you in the dark. I mean, you know, common sense. But we are all created equally with those belly buttons. And I was also shown time. And there is eternity. I beheld eternity. It just went out. And what was it doing with eyeballs? But that's another subject. I could see everything in linear time. I knew it was linear time. And there was no beginning and there was no end. And it was the light that was causing this vision. But then the light started, without interrupting the endlessness of time, started just layering on itself. And I was told that those were dimensions, and they were also unlimited. So it's a complicated life. Not only is there no beginning or end to time, unless it's this broadcast, and but also we have a variety of dimensions with which we can interact and do. And all this talk of UFOs now, this is just going to date this, but there's a lot of jammer. I'm thinking, well, maybe they didn't come from linear time. Maybe they dropped down from other dimensions. I don't know. My head explodes. There's also a capacity I was given upon return to perceive what I call invisibilities. And it's a crowded room, let me tell you. So, you know, there's deceased loved ones. There's deceased people I never met in my life. There's what we call angels. There's what I call negative energy. There's what I call guides. There's blue things. Where'd you come from? I mean, it's really fascinating. And it's so wonderful to be alive. So it's more than just world unity. It's everything unity that I appreciate. I love life, you know, not afraid of death, having been there, having that tested with breast cancer and given 8 to 10 months to live. And I hate to give away the ending to a good book, because I did write a good book, which happens to be here, nothing to do with the broadcast, it just happens to be here. But anyway, she lived, but you know, don't tell, but lived fully and with gratitude. And again, my apologies for messing up on the time. I had a lot more to say. You'll just have to write to me.
Kimberly, tell them about your Netflix film.
Oh yeah,
the movie star you got.
Well, another book was written, and I happened to be hired to write a story, not a story, a chapter in that book called Surviving Death. And the chapter I wrote about was a shoe that I found on a ledge at a huge trauma center in Seattle, where I worked on intensive care and coronary care. And one of my patients needed to be resuscitated. And upon recovery, she said, there's a shoe on a ledge. And I was a social worker, so I go get it. So I've luck the Kim started on the wrong side of the hospital, but finally found it. Her bed was in the north section center of the hospital, second floor. I found the shoe in another part of the hospital on the third floor. Her room faced north, shoe faced west. And I couldn't spot it from the ground because I tried that. So that chapter got really good reviews in the book. So then Netflix came along and they decided to do a series based in part on the book. And I was just a hired hand to find near-death experiencers for episode 1. But well into it, they said, wait, we've got a story with you, Kim. And the story is me leading the Seattle International Association for Near-Death Studies, which I began in June this month in 1982. So this is our 39th anniversary. Still going strong. I haven't aged a bit. And they filmed a meeting, and the first episode has gotten the big cheers. I mean, it's really, I think, the best in the series, and others would probably not disagree with that. But I love the way they presented Seattle Ions, because it shows me doing what literally I was sent back to do, and again, to be of service. And they captured it perfectly. I just want to add that the camera adds 50 pounds, so it doesn't, but there I am doing what I do best. So yeah, so Netflix episode 1, for the longest time, it was number 3 viewed. I am like the lady that helps people. So I've got 4,050 unanswered emails, and if anyone wants to help me, I'll welcome it. And I still want to be the woman that helps people. And I hope in the brief time that we've had here together, I've helped somebody.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I really think there's, as you can see, that each one of these speakers have so much to offer about the possibility of us seeing that we are only perceiving so much of what is here for us to use. But I'd love to see, because of time, and geez, Kimberly, we'll have to do this again. The other question I wanted to ask, and I also would love for the people in the audience to ask, and then we'll be glad to unmute you and show you on the screen. I want to ask all of you, was it difficult to share your experience? Was it difficult? Brooke had mentioned not having words. Was it difficult for you to share your near-death experience? Kimberly, since you're on camera, do you want to start?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yes. Yes and no. I had no words at first. There was just a lot of crying. There were no words. And that went on for the longest time. And then I had a great aunt who pulled me onto her ample lamp and said, well, honey, you've had yourself a spiritual experience. And I went, okay. And there was no such thing. This is in 1970 in Kansas. You know, could I be more remotely involved from support? No. So near-death experiences hadn't been coined, but I was shown my future if I chose to live. And I saw people, I saw a place where mountains met water, and I saw me being of service, and I said, cool. And God decided, oh, that was my decision, you know, tricked me. But I had to find where I was going to live. I had to find the people that I was shown I would be interacting with. And then I had to be of service, and it all landed in Seattle, Washington. And so I began to blab as much as I could until I, again, was at Harborview Medical Center, saw a woman in the ER in 2-point restraints. I said, you know, what's her story to the resident? Oh, she's being taken up to inpatient psychiatric lockup because she feels like she's going in and out of her body. And I went, oops, I'm never sharing, because I was. So there was another after effect. So I was quiet about it for the longest time, and then was doing a television show, and they asked the big question, well, have you yourself ever had a near-death experience? Live TV, and I couldn't lie. So yes. And I thought, oh, everyone's going to think I'm crazy now, but it didn't. And I worked, you know, University of Washington, hardcore Western medicine setting. Never was a problem. Never, ever, ever, ever. So I've been blessed.
Thank you. Thank you. So Brooke, do you want to take the talking stick next? Thank you, Kimberly.
Sure. As I acknowledged earlier, initially it was, but much because I was really going through that reintegration process. And so it felt inauthentic because I was going through some very human stuff to speak for the spirit. So once I really started to achieve homeostasis within the reintegration process, then it became a whole new story. Then it became that quantum field that we've all been discussing when we we would begin to share the stories, or when I'm with other experiencers and just receiving your all's stories, it uplifts the vibration to such a place that you feel that connection to the divine here and now. For as Rob said, it's always with us. It's just a matter of perspective, you know, how these webs are interconnected. There's not really this separation in the quantum or the multidimensional field, as Kim called it. And so now I find that as long as I allow my human to walk into a situation, with grace and ease, then spirit takes over and it becomes a most blessed event to share and a genuine honor, and also to receive. It's always such a joy to receive from other experiencers. But it did take time. And again, very earthly construct, because as Kim and I touched upon, time is very different on the other side. So thank you.
Thank you. And Rob, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Yes, I had a very difficult time trying to put all of this together, because a couple of things. I mean, so it took me, the book was just published in February, and I've celebrated my 5th year as a heart transplant survivor on June 6th. So it was 2 years before I began to really put my head into writing the book, because it was so difficult. So those first 2 years were grappling with everything, understanding that how we're all connected, how the spiritual and the temporal, everything's woven together. And I work in a very conservative industry. I'm a sales engineer for a steel company, and I have a very conservative manufacturing, client base. And I said to myself, I was coming from a place of fear. Hey, if I share this, I'm going to lose all my clients. People are going to think I'm crazy. So I had to get through that process of, coming to the point of surrender and vulnerability and saying, you know what, this is so much more important to share this, that if something would happen with the JOB, I believe the Spirit's going to take care of me and open even a better door. And to my surprise, when the book was published, I was amazed at the people that came to me and opened up and started to share their stories. Very, conservative introverts that have been afraid of opening to spirit and talking about their own personal lives and what they've experienced. Because guess what? Sooner or later, I think we're all touched by spirit. In my book, I opened with the chapter that I saw the light. It descended upon me in the shape of an orb when I was in my crib. And I think that's, if we're open to it, somewhere along the line, everybody has an experience with spirit. Because spirit, it's who we are. And it wants to connect with us desperately to help us through this journey. So, yeah, but again, it was tough.
Yes, thank you so much. And you guys have to read Rob's book to get all of his story, because we didn't get to go all the way through it, but it's a fantastic book.
Okay.
There is a question from Noelle. Noelle, would you like to show on screen and answer a question in person, or yay, okay.
Well, it's really okay for you to do it, Kathy, but since you forced me. Hi, I'm so happy with this panel, all your sharing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Such rich experiences that, of course, you can't describe in language. So I was wondering, I've been told many times that we choose our parents, and I'm thinking like, okay, why did I say I'll be one of 15 children? And then you choose your geography and that you have several exit points. And did you get any verification for any of this counseling that we get before we come to this planet?
Take it.
Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm on.
You are,
lost
Kimberly.
Okay. Thanks for letting me jump in, because yes. When, again, I mentioned I was born in Kansas. I hated change. My life was like locked in. I hated change so much. I planned to marry a little boy I met in 7th grade. His last name was Clark. I could still be Kim Clark. Yay. God showed me, though, and when I say God, I don't mean that in any religious sense. I'm just confined to 3 little letters, but that's not who the creator, I don't know what to call that love. It's just love. Anyway, that yes, I had chosen well. I got a grounded Kansas upbringing, and now it was time to pluck Kim out post NDE and put her in a different location where I would be flying high as a kite all the time, but still have grounded roots. And I also believe that even my husband, who's a Seattle firefighter and used to be head of Medic 1 here, I call him Ben Franklin, and I'm a kite. So he grounds me. So the kite doesn't go flying off, because that's how high I am in this subject. But on the other hand, I provide the electricity to the relationship, the juice. So again, I feel like even my husband was chosen. As far as so that's what God told me, that yes, we do choose, maybe in very deep detail, the who's and the whys and the wheres. And why would someone choose to be born in, a Jew in Germany in 1939? I mean, I don't get that. I don't get it. But exit points, yes. And I had an exit point. I was also shown in my near-death experience that I would die before my 31st birthday in a small white plane. And I made no secret of it. I'm open book here. And so I was dating a fellow who owned a small white plane, freaking out, my friends. But I was invited to Maui by a Don Sharp. There is a connection. I've been looking after his little kids. Well, he chased my housemate, and he just said, just come, and I'm grateful, and blah blah blah. We were just friends, but he put a lei around my neck and gave me the aloha welcome, and it's like a curtain fell. I was like, oh my gosh, he's my husband, but I was supposed to be dying. So I fell in love. He fell in love. That was 39 years ago when that story happened. And my exit point was coming, and he believed his exit point was coming too, that he was not going to survive getting off the island. In fact, he did almost drown trying to save a swimmer. And he was a real hero of the island, and he did not drown. Again, I'll refer you to After the Light, because I wrote about it big time there. And I went outside on the last night of my stay there and said, I want my contract changed. I want it changed. And because God can be such a drama queen, big thunder and lightning and wind blew up. And I thought, oh, now you're just showing off. But when I got to the airport the next day and I saw the small white plane waiting and a big boiling storm coming, I was fine. I knew the contract had been changed. So yes, we have exit points, but they can change. You can go by the exit point, but eventually we're biological beings, and those belly buttons I mentioned have to go away, because we're just, out of skin and out of organs, and it's time to go, what I call homey home. Thank you.
Wonderful. Does Brooke or Rob, would you like to answer your experience? Thank you, Kimberly.
Sure, I'll speak to that a little bit. Yes, I concur with Kim that there are multiple manifestations of timelines for individuals. And yes, the soul contract is something that we negotiated, we chose while we were up in the etheric chakras between lives. Yet when we come into body, into spirit, we are able to renegotiate that. We can clear karma, we can make different choices. And one of the beautiful aspects I enjoy of my gifts is that when I'm working in the quantum field and I'm able to open up and see the soul star chakra, I'm able to see why persons did make some of the choices they did. They might be presenting, complaining of, complex trauma or something of that nature. But when we get into the soul star and we're able to connect the dots that are shown in the subtle bodies, it becomes very self-evident why we make certain choices for our highest and best. And spirit will recycle those choices over and over again until we get the lesson. But if we choose to get the lesson, if we choose to embody it and use it for our highest good, then we have the ability. We're able to say, I'm nullifying that karma. It's paid. It's been lived through the bloodline. It ends with me. And I'm going to renegotiate that in my contract and shift that. And we take that power, and it's a spiritual power. And that's part of what Spirit has given us, that divine free will. But it comes to us asking, it comes to us taking accountability for what timeline we are choosing to utilize in this incarnation, and then being aligned, our intention, our vibration. It's not manifestation in the typical way. It's an active act. You are committing in mind, body, spirit, emotion, and energy to align yourself to a new outcome. And your soul, the quantum, the multidimensional, it's all highly capable of that. And Source is always going to support you in whatever creates the most love. So if you can clear karma, if you can change your contract, and it's for the highest and best of all, of course, you're going to be held in love and supported. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. And Rob, need you to unmute. I'm sorry. There you go.
Yeah, I have a different take on it. Although I agree in theory with both Kimberly and Brooke on that. But it does boil down to free will. We do have a choice. We can always ask, and we can change things, because this is part of what I learned through my near-death experience. First of all, I know now, I understand that I was actually meant to die for a lot of complicated reasons, and I was actually meant to get the heart that I have. And I believe that the young woman that gave me her heart, that was actually her purpose. I talk about that in the book, although some of that's very, very difficult sometimes to wrap our heads around. But I do believe that there is destiny. I believe we can change it through our actions because we're given free will. We're not robots. But to me, it's not as simple, because I still think that the only thing we can really control are our own actions. Sometimes the results are in God's hands. That's been my experience personally. It doesn't matter how much energy work I could do on my daughter or what choices that she could make. She's going to remain crippled in this lifetime. She has to live out this mission that she accepted. So where some of that doesn't work for me is in these kind of situations where it would be impossible to change her in this dimension. And God knows that I've tried everything that you could possibly imagine, and I'll keep trying, because that is part of my purpose, to keep trying. It's not to like just surrender to this and accept that, no, and just love, because you also have to follow that up with action. So for me, it's a bit soupy. It's still a little bit complicated. But like I said, in theory, I agree with so much of what both Kimberly and Brooke had discussed. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so sorry we're out of time, because there were a couple more questions, but it just worked out perfectly. Thank you so much for sharing everything. I did put your websites in the chat so people can reach you, but real quick, Rob, since you're unmuted, why don't you tell everybody what your website is and best way to reach you?
Oh, sure. So my website is Rob A. Gentile. That's ROBAGENTILE.com. And my book is Corks of Light, A Near-Death Experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Kimberly, next up, because you're unmuted.
Yes, well, website is
Thanks,
for Seattle Ions, but you can reach me through seattleions@yahoo.com or land right on my desk at KIMNDE for Kim Near Death Experiences at AOL.com. I am the last dinosaur on AOL.com, so it won't be hard to find me. I think I'm it. And I wrote a book called After the Light that is in my own voice. So if you liked what you heard and you like to laugh, because I like humor, it's there. It's is there for you. So thank you. And thank you. And again, my apologies for being such a mess up.
Oh, no, no, it's perfect.
It's my belly button. I'm blaming my belly button.
Okay, and then Brooke, could you please, I did put your website in, but please would you share it also for those that can't see the chat?
Yes, Kathy. My website is Brooke with an E, Grove, Grove, healing.com. And you can submit anything through the contact inquiries on there. I do appreciate it if you keep them brief. I've been receiving a lot of 12-page emails lately, and they're hard to get back to. So brief emails, please, but I would love to hear from you all. And thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, well, thank you all so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I guess, Noelle, I don't want to go into the next time zone, but I really wish we had 2 more hours. I really did.
I
Thank
do
you.
too, Kathy. This has been really amazing. Thank you so much to all the panelists. And we will have the video archived on our website, co-creatorsconvergence.com, but it'll take a little while. But it's on Facebook now. So if you can download Facebook, because this is something definitely worth watching again.
Yes. Thank
Thank you.
you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Love you.